So, Madam President, on the bipartisan infrastructure bill now before the Senate, I'm glad to see that the Majority Leader, Senator Schumer, is allowing amendments to be presented from folks on both sides. Senator Schumer had given us an artificial deadline to finish the bill, but he's also told us we're not going home until we do so, and we take him at his word. But I hope he will continue to allow this process to play out, no matter how long it takes, until this legislation is ready to be voted on. That's principally because the process that brought this bill to the floor did not involve the regular normal hearings and markups across multiple Senate committees. That's certainly not a criticism of the bipartisan group that's gotten us to where we are. It's really just a statement of the dysfunction of the legislative process in the Senate these days. But the fact is, the vast majority of the senators in this chamber did not have a hand in crafting this legislation, even though it will impact every single community across the country. I believe the bipartisan group worked in good faith to get us to the starting gate, and now it's time to allow every senator representing every state in the country to weigh in and offer improvements in the bill. I've said from the beginning that an open amendment process will be critical to the success of this legislation, and that's especially true when it comes to paying for this legislation. We're waiting for the Congressional Budget Office, the official scorer, to tell us what the cost will be and whether we've been successful in offsetting pay-fors. One budget expert at the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget has already forecasted a discouraging score. He estimated the bill would only raise about $208 billion, less than half of the new spending in the bill. But it's important for all of us to realize we are also reauthorizing the expiring Surface Transportation Bill, which is ordinarily financed by the Highway Trust Fund. And it's going to require another $118 billion to shore that up, because the White House has taken off the table any other pay-fors that would include a user fee on electric vehicles or indexing the gas tax or other ideas that would fill in that gap. So another $118 billion of borrowed money is going to be necessary to fill that gap. I don't think any of us regard that as a good outcome. Maybe it's the best we can do under the circumstances. But as it stands now, our debt to GDP, our debt to gross domestic product ratio, is at the highest level it's been since World War II. In other words, we fought a world war to defeat Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany, and we didn't ask how much it cost. We did what we had to do. We did the same thing when it came to COVID, which was a domestic equivalent, I think, of war, defeating the virus and shoring up our economy. But our country has invested a huge amount of money in the war against COVID-19, and now is not the time to double down on out-of-control spending for a non-emergency matter. We need to find responsible ways to finance these new expenses, and I hope we'll have an opportunity to vote on a range of amendments to that end. I've been proud to work with Senator Padilla, our new senator from California, a Democrat, to offer an amendment that would provide more funding for a variety of infrastructure projects, including roads, bridges, and public transit. What it does is it gives state and local leaders more authority when it comes to identifying and investing in the greatest needs of their states and their communities. And here's the kicker. It does so without increasing the deficit one penny. That's because it gives state and local leaders the ability to spend COVID relief funding that they already have on infrastructure projects that might otherwise be neglected. They're not required to do so, but our amendment would allow them to do so rather than to claw that money back when the appropriation sunsets, or to put guardrails on it and say you can only use it for some prescribed uses, which frankly, they've got more money to spend than they know what to do with when it comes to those authorized uses. As folks hunkered down at their home to slow the spread of the virus, and the change in travel patterns hurt more than airlines and hotels, it put a serious dent in state and local transportation budgets in all of our states. State departments of transportation are facing an estimated $18 billion in shortfalls through 2024. Leaders across the country have had to delay or cancel critical transportation projects because of a lack of funding, and it's unclear when those projects may get back on track. And I might say, Madam President, that one of the things we've seen with the eviction moratorium expiring is that $46 billion of money we appropriated last year still hasn't gotten to the intended beneficiary, that the people who are trying to pay their rent but can't pay their rent. So we have a huge problem, a logistical problem in voting on money and actually getting it to the intended beneficiary. That's true in COVID-19, it's true in disaster relief, and the type of thing that Senator Padilla and I are suggesting is to take money that's already in the hands of the state and local governments and let them use it so they can do it quickly on investments which will last and endure rather than just spend it on operating expenses. There's an urgent need for more transportation funding, and that's exactly what our amendment would provide. There's no mandate, as I said, that it be spent for a single transportation project. But if a city or state or a county has plans to use their funds on pandemic-related expenses, those plans will not be interrupted or called into question. But it simply provides our local leaders what they've asked each of us for most. And it starts with flexibility. If a city is experiencing a spike in COVID cases and needs to use federal funding to buy additional ICU bed space or hire new healthcare workers, they can and they should move forward with those plans. This is not about cutting resources that are needed. But we know that many states and localities simply don't have enough qualifying expenses to use the money that they've been given. They're looking for ways to spend the dollars they already have as given to them in the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan. That's not to say they don't want this funding, they just want to be able to use it consistent with the guardrails that Congress has provided, and that's what our amendment will allow. The broad support for this amendment is testament to the importance of these changes. Our amendment's been endorsed by 24 organizations that represent a diverse range of stakeholders, from the National League of Cities, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations, all of which advocate on behalf of cities across the country. We've also received endorsements from the American Road and Transportation Builders Association, which represents all facets of the transportation construction industry, as well as the American Public Transit Association. It also includes organizations that advocate for safer roads, like the American Traffic Safety Services Association. I've been pleased to find common ground with Senator Padilla and our colleagues on both sides of the aisle to help build support for this amendment, and I think actually enhance the work done by the bipartisan negotiating group. This is not something they were able to get done in that negotiating group, they've told me, even though it was a subject of discussion. So now it's a chance for the rest of us on a bipartisan basis to weigh in and make this bill better. Throughout the process, we've made adjustments so states with unique but no less important infrastructure needs can put this funding toward those uses. We're in the process of making some final tweaks to ensure that we receive broad bipartisan support as well as that of the White House, and I hope we'll have a vote on this amendment on the Senate floor soon. Our amendment will empower local officials to make the best decisions for their communities and ensure that taxpayers get the most bang for their buck with these relief funds that have already been appropriated, and that if we do not authorize their use in the manner I've described, will likely be spent on annual or reoccurring expenses rather than on something that will endure for a long time, like infrastructure. So I hope our amendment will come to a vote in the Senate very soon. There's no reason to rush the amendment process and to cut off good amendments for a vote or consideration that will actually improve this legislation. There are a lot of great ideas out there to strengthen this bill, to maximize the impact of every dollar and pay for these investments responsibly. So let me just close by saying, Madam President, I appreciate the hard work that's gone into this bill so far, and I hope we'll continue to have more opportunities to improve it as the amendment process goes forward.